listening to the LOZ Podcast Network.
Hello, everyone. Welcome to the LOZ Podcast Network. My name is Ken Lawler, and you are either watching us in the LOZ app or you're listening to us on KRMS radio on Saturday mornings from 10 to 11 a.m. We talk to all different people around town. We get all the insights that are going on. I'm excited because I got my buddy Jeff Krantz coming on today to talk about real estate in the market. Jeff, how you doing?
Good morning. Doing well.
I'll tell you, man, the real estate game at the lake is never it's always in flux, isn't it?
You'll never figure it out. The minute you think you've got to figure it out, it's moving. It's changing.
Tell me, you do a great symposium at the end of every year where you get together and go over kind of the numbers from the previous year. And we love to kind of see where we've been. But where are we going, man? What do you see is coming in 2026 for the lake market?
Well, yeah, I love those symposiums because, my crystal ball is pretty foggy normally. But it does help to know where you've been. And the last few years have been very similar. So last year ended up a little bit better than the previous year in almost every segment. And all the signs point to a really good year. One interesting thing that the consumer doesn't see a lot that we watch are the active inventories. So a couple months ago, they had been kind of continuing to climb from a crazy low to something that was a little more normalized. Actually, still low, but they took a dip again. So right now we're seeing low inventories. For instance, any guess on how many lakefront homes are on the market right now?
Oh my gosh! Well, there's thousands and thousands and thousands. I mean, 10,000?
I clicked the button today. 231.
Oh my gosh!
231. Yes. Now
that's barely a cove.
So to put that into context, for years and years, it was about 800 to 1,200, and then it went all the way down to less than 100, and it built itself back up after COVID, and it got to a high last year of probably between 300 and 400, and now it's back down to 231. So condos are similar. Last year there were over 500 on the market. Right now we're sitting at 385. Off-water homes, and that's Kemeton, Eldon, Osage Beach, Lake Ozark for sales even. Off-water homes are 415. So the consumer doesn't normally get to see how the active inventory changes. That gives us a little bit of a, who knows what else is going to change. We were really high on the thought that rates were going to change, and maybe they will. But regardless of rate changes, the inventory stabilizing or at least staying, not moving out of control, tells me that we're likely not to see any kind of huge change in values. I think values will continue to hold or increase in most of the markets. I think it's going to be a great year for the lake.
Well, and I know that when you guys were going over your numbers, one thing that stood out to me was the appreciation of real estate year over year at the lake, and particularly not just on the water, but I mean, everything was showing increases. And I think people sometimes try to time the market, and they try to say, I'm going to go when there's an interest rate here. If you sat out for 3 years and waited, you lost so much more in equity than you ever would have gained in interest rate savings, right?
Oh, yeah. And that's a constant conversation. And that's as far back as I can remember. My parents had the same conversation. It seems to be too expensive when somebody buys, and then when they sell, they're like, well, nobody will ever get that deal again. I mean, I don't know how many times I heard in 2008 that we'll never see in 2006. And I know that you have heard this over and over, but there's just that isn't the time to buy is right now. Well, it was 5 years ago, but now
right. It's right. I mean, I think back to, and we all do this, right? You think back to, if I had bought those 4 lots when they were $150,000, and I thought that was expensive back then, and now they're $350,000. I mean, I couldn't put it in the stock market and get that kind of appreciation, right?
No, we're so fortunate, though. I mean, I think lots and lots of places have this type of story to tell, but boy, with everything we've got slotted for development. And, with all the growth that we're seeing, I just think we have a pretty positive outlook. Now, people still have unrealistic expectations. There's still a lot, there's a lot of agents, I think, that are going to have a tough time yet this year because the transaction numbers. I don't see a serious increase in transaction numbers. I mean, a huge one, maybe 10%. And when you have, when you have a certain number of transactions and you're not changing or adjusting to it, it might cause some issue with some folks. But from a consumer standpoint, yeah, I think I agree with you. I think people are still going to make money on the property.
Well, and I always like to give our viewers and our listeners a little nugget of, if you're looking to get into the market, what's an opportunity right now at Lake of the Ozarks? If you had to pick an opportunity where you said, you haven't been to the lake, you want to try it, this is something I think you can get into right now. And the way the market is, you might get what is essentially a deal if there's one out there.
So the three biggest sections are lakefront residential, off-water residential, and condominiums. Though that makes up the bulk of our market. Condos were pretty flat for the last couple years. And when I say flat, declining in transactions and flat in value. The new condos did fine. They held, but the resales that were a little bit dated, there were a lot more negotiations on that. So I think there's some opportunity there. There's always opportunity in lakefront because they're not making any more of it. That is an ancient statement, but it's so true.
Right.
But if you have a we call them incurable. If you have a property with an incurable, they don't fly off the shelves. There is a little bit more negotiation. And when I say incurable, I mean, if it has something I can't change, if it has a real steep driveway that you can't change, or maybe water depth issue, I mean, there's going to be more negotiation on that property than there has been. So,
and it's the lake is just, that's the funny thing about I love the driveways, because I owned a home in Portachima that had a very steep driveway. And when I went to sell it, the house was beautiful. Everything loved it. But that driveway just got into the minds of the potential owners. And I wish they could develop a class for how to drive out of a steep driveway.
Well, it's a process.
At the lake, and get them over it right away, because you're never walking out of it. You're driving out of it. So
and it happens. It's a process when you first have somebody that's not accustomed to that, and the realtor gets them in the car. They're driving along and they just whip down the driveway. When that happens, that person locks up, and by the time they go down to the sixth or seventh one that day, they're like, this is not so bad, because we're the same as you. We have lived with it. We're so used to it. It's no big deal. And for the longest time, it didn't affect sales, and it really still doesn't, but there might be a little more hesitation than there was a couple years ago. Everything was selling a couple years ago. So.
Yeah, and I think it's interesting, because the way you view homes at the lake is different, and in any other market, you're driving down a street and you're looking at the front of a home and you're trying to see if it has great curb appeal and whatever. Throw all that out the door at the lake. You need to be on a boat and driving it from the lakeside, because that's truly what the curb appeal is down here, right? So you could look at a house from the backside, or what would be the front side, and say, that's not much of a house, until you go around the back and see everything they've done with a pool and 3 decks and a fire pit and all that on the water. And that's when you truly appreciate what's going on.
Amen. Because you're going to either have a driveway or you're going to have a lot of steps. There's not a lot of perfect. So it's like figuring out what is most important for you. And then, like we talked about, it's a want, not a need. They want that, they want to be there because of that lakefront. And I don't know the percentage today, but with respect to lakefront and I bet you lakefront has to be 80% second homes, third homes.
Yeah.
Condos probably more, probably 90, 95.
And that's changing too, because we got all these new businesses coming to the lake. There's going to be, the Oasis, and then you got the Bass Pro Shops, and you got potentially 1 or 2 casinos. Some of the off-water stuff and just the general full-time housing at the lake is going to really get interesting.
Yeah, for sure. It's a challenge because we need it so bad. I think it's going to cause a lot of our, I don't know how to describe it, but the communities like the Eldon and Camden and and Versailles and halfway to Jeff City and those areas. It's going to cause a lot of growth in those areas because we need it to support. And frankly, I don't know that you're going to see a lot of it really close into the hub because of the land cost, construction cost. But we're gonna have to see a lot of growth there.
Yeah, and I do see a lot of second tier building, like over in Portachima, the villages. You're seeing a lot more second tier homes going up in those areas now that the toll bridge is gone and it doesn't cost $3 to go get a cup of coffee every time, or actually $6 with the return. So that's a big mental thing out of the way. I think those areas are going to appreciate on that. But look, I think I want to finish up the show today talking about. I want to give you a little kudos because I heard a number the other day and I was just blown away by it. But if you are doing a transaction at Lake of the Ozarks, I don't care if you're buying or if you're selling, there's almost a 1 in 2 chance you're dealing with RE/MAX. That is a huge, huge market domination.
Well, we're not quite there, but we're close. And we're just lucky. We got a lot of great agents. We got 120 of the best agents in the country, in my opinion. But that's the feather, the people. It's just a lot of but
it's just such a testament to what you guys have built over there. I'm just so happy you guys are doing great. I want to have you back on the show for another segment as we get a little closer into the spring, kind of get Jeff's view on what's going on with the spring market. But man, I really appreciate you joining me today on the LOZ Podcast Network. We love having you on.
You bet, buddy.
All right, everybody, that's Jeff Krantz. We'll have him on again, and we will be right back after these words.